The Celestial Dungeons in Mist of Pandaria are basically Blizzard's alternative to Raid Finder. Now, many people love Raid Finder, many people hate Raid Finder, and then there's other people who just couldn't care less. If you've been playing throughout Cataclysm, this should be nothing new to you, because we've basically had exactly the same thing in the form of Twilight Dungeons. Where before Twilight Dungeons we had Inferno Dungeons, and then going even back to Wrath of the Lich King where we had Alpha, Beta and Gamma, all of these were used as catch-up mechanics, whereas since Twilight Dungeons, and now obviously the new Celestial Dungeons, they're a replacement for Raid Finder. So any item that you would have been able to get from Raid Finder, you can get from the Celestial Dungeons. From the last boss in each of these Celestial Dungeons, they drop some items, and then you're also going to get a currency from each boss, and then a bonus currency if you kill all the bosses, including the last one, to then go to a vendor and be able to buy any gear that you're missing. Everything inside these Celestial Dungeons deals 25% more damage and has 100% more health, and the bosses have got 3 specific boss mechanics that they can trigger throughout a fight. Now, that's not the trash, that is just the bosses. So from Amber Shaper in Heart of Fear, they've got the ability to do Amber Scalpel, which is basically a line that will follow you and leave little pools on the floor, and then it will spawn some ads that you need to kill. From Blade Lord in Heart of Fear Heroic, it's also got the ability where it pulls you in and you have to just run away. It's just a whirlwind, the boss is spinning around in a circle. Now, it's not the actual boss that does this, it's a separate spawn, so you will have Blade Lord himself spawn and start doing the whirlwind, and you just need to run away from it. And the final mechanic is wind bombs. So from Windlord Maljarak, again in Heart of Fear, there'll be wind bombs that get placed on the floor, and if you walk into them and trigger them, it will do AoE damage to the raid, or in the Celestial Dungeons, to the group. Now, all of these mechanics are fairly obvious and pretty easy to spot. I've done absolutely tons of these Celestial Dungeons now, and these are the only abilities that I've seen. But have Blizzard got the ability to be able to add more abilities in? I feel like I just said ability a lot. Absolutely. So maybe they'll add a few mechanics from Terrace of Endless Springs or even MSV later on down the line, but that's just speculation. Now, firstly, I just want to touch on the difficulty, because these are a bit of a weird one. To offset the fact that the bosses have got more health and deal more damage and you've got more mechanics to watch out for, you can gain one of 4 buffs. Now, as you would imagine, on the basis they're called Celestial Dungeons, you're going to get a buff from each of the 4 Celestials. Now, you can only have one of these buffs at a time, and it's pretty clear-cut which one you should use in most cases. You've got Nizuel, which is a tank buff, which just gives you stamina and your primary stat, and then also when you're dodging, parrying, blocking, that's going to increase your stamina further and also increase your strength, agility and intellect. And that stacks. Blessing of Zuen is more for melee DPS and hunters, where it increases your strength and agility, and then your attacks have got a chance of unleashing the Echo of Zuen's ferocity, which basically just does a chain lightning. If you're a caster, you'll be able to get Blessing of Yulon, but not just casters, and I'll touch on that once we've gone through the buffs. But Blessing of Yulon increases your intellect, and then damaging spells and abilities inflict Jade Fire Burn into the target. So this is a dot that ramps up, whilst also, at the same time, increasing their magic damage taken, which also stacks. And then finally, Chi-Ji, which is for the healers, which increases your intellect, which is the only important thing, and your healing spells have got a chance of putting a circle around the target that you healed, increasing their movement speed and healing nearby allies, while also dealing damage to nearby enemies every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. Now, the thing is, Yulon is really strong, so if you're something like a Mistweaver monk or a Discipline priest, for example, or even a Resto shaman, to be fair, because there's not that much damage going around in these, which we will get to the difficulty in a minute, it's not like you need Blessing of Chi-Ji to be able to get through it. It's actually better that you do some more damage and take Blessing of Yulon. Now, generally, when I'm running through these fist weaving on my Mistweaver monk, the Blessing of Yulon dot is doing more damage than anything else. I've run both Chi-Ji and Yulon, and I can honestly say that Yulon I got much better results from. So if you're a healer that's quite offensive, and I don't mean calling people names, then I'd heavily recommend Yulon over Chi-Ji. Now, the same even goes for tanking. I was switching between Nizuel and Zuen as a Brewmaster monk, and while I only done it a few times and I've not got really solid results to be able to show you, Zuen just felt really good, and I genuinely feel like I was doing more damage using Zuen than I was Nizuel. But again, I would want to test this a little bit more first, and that probably won't be until they go live. Now, in terms of difficulty, I'd honestly say the extra mechanics that get added to the final bosses just don't really make that much difference at all. You're not really looking out for much. It's really obvious when the ability is going off, so it don't really have much complexity. And the amount of damage we're doing from having these buffs really does offset the fact that they've got double the amount of health, and I'll be honest with you, it's barely noticeable. So firstly, these are really comfortable. Currently, the eye level requirement is 435, which is the same as Heroic Dungeons, which does, in my opinion, make Heroic Dungeons null and void more or less 2 weeks into the expansion. Well, I should really say 2 weeks after the raids open, because there'd be kinda no reason to do anything else. If you're freshly dinged and the Celestial Dungeons are available, these are just going to be what you go straight into. So don't panic, they're not as hard as challenge modes, but they're not quite as easy as the regular Heroics. It's a tiny little step up, whereas if you was to go from regular Heroics to challenge modes, that's a big step up. The one thing I will say though is they are fun. They're a lot more fun than the regular Heroics. They're not going to feel as much of a drag as the Twilight dungeons in Cataclysm, because in general the dungeons in Cataclysm are just a lot longer. They're a lot more of a slog, the bosses are a lot more, I want to say, intricate, whereas in MoP the dungeons are a lot smaller. You can really smash through these super fast, and again, with these new buffs that you get from the Celestials, it just feels fun because you're just doing so much damage. So yeah, just counting in the fun factor, I'll be honest with you, I could do this all day. And then the most important thing is the loot, and this is actually somewhere you can help. So the Chunkinator is a big boy rep paladin in our guild Y Pink on Mankrik. Over the last couple of weeks has been compiling a sheet with all the loot on, so we actually know many of the items that come from these dungeons, and also how the loot works, which I'll touch on now. But I'll put a link to Chunk's YouTube channel in the description below, so you can go and thank him yourself by subscribing to his channel, because it's not just the loot that's on this sheet, it's also got a calculator on it as well, so you can tick the items that you want. It'll tell you how many of the new currency you need to go and farm. But if you're not sure how the Celestial Dungeons work, because this is the first time you're looking at it, after Moghasham Vaults opens, 2 weeks after that is when the Celestial Dungeons will first launch, and the only items available will be the items that you can get from Moghasham Vaults. 2 weeks after Heart of Fear launches, the Heart of Fear gear will be added, and then 2 weeks after Terrace launches, the Terrace gear will be added. Now, while at the moment we don't know if the previous gear will be removed, so how it looks like it is based on the beta is you've got 2 MSV items, 2 Hoth items, and 2 Terrace items. And one of these 6 items drops from the last boss, as well as a tier token. Of course, we're not going to get the first half of the tier tokens until Heart of Fear opens, and then we'll get the rest of the tier tokens when Terrace opens. But to begin with, from MSV, it should just be 1 or maybe 2 items. I kind of feel like it should drop 2 on the basis during MSV there is no tier gear, but at the very minimum it will drop 1 of 2 items. Now remember, this is all based off the beta, so this could change, but as you can see from this sheet, with something like Scarlet Monastery, at the moment all it's missing is that 1 Heart of Fear item that we don't know about. But we already know the 2 items that come from MSV, the 2 items that come from Terrace, and 1 of the items that come from Heart of Fear. Now this is where you can help finish this sheet off. If you join my Discord, which also is in a link in the description below, there's a Celestial Dungeon loot channel. When you do any of these Celestials on the beta over the next week or so, when you kill the last boss, take a screenshot of your chat log so we can see what boss you killed and the loot that's dropped, and then we can update the sheet accordingly. Simply just saying in the channel, oh, this boss dropped this item, is no good. We obviously need the evidence, we need to see the screenshot. But that will help finish this sheet off. At the moment, Shadowpan Monastery and Moghasham Palace are bugged. Hopefully they'll be fixed on Thursday, but at the moment we don't know any items that come from those. But with it only being 2 items that drop from each of the raids in the Celestial Dungeons, I would kind of guess that if you do a Scarlet Halls, for example, you're going to get 2 drops before Heart of Fear launches because there's going to be no tier token, but you could get 2 of Feng's rings, or 2 of the Cloak of Peacock feathers, or maybe 1 of each. Now I could be wrong, that is a pure guess based off, well, logic. If we're always going to get 2 items dropping from the Celestial Dungeons, but it's not until the second phase of the Celestial Dungeons where we get the extra item, it kind of makes sense that we're just going to get 2 items all the way through. And then when Heart of Fear comes out, it'll be 1 item and 1 tier token, still meaning 2 items. But overall, there's a lot of the loot found on this sheet already, and again, with your help, we'll be able to get this filled out completely, ready for launch for everybody to use, and you can know that you played a part in it. And I'll be honest with you, in a nutshell, that's the Celestial Dungeons. There's lots of things around Heroic Dungeons that's been fixed, like there was a skip that I've been doing for a long time now, which wasn't even fixed on MoP Remix, where you could get under the ground in Siege of Nizuel. If you try and do that now, you die, which is really annoying. So they are tweaking some of these dungeons as well. So if you've seen any skip videos or people talking about how to speedrun them on challenge modes, just be mindful that some of these cheesy skips that we've been doing on the beta might not make it into live. And as always, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Check out Rested XP in the pinned comment in the description if you want to pick up a Rested XP guide, which is the fastest way to level in the pre-patch onwards. And you may have noticed at the start that the giveaway was active, so I've done it in 2 back-to-back videos. The winner of this video will be released in 7 days' time, so make sure you check the description below, go back, find that movie quote. And now I'm going to finish my coffee and see you on the next one.